Blackwells Justice. Lady Catherine of Dunmere had once trusted Sir Tristan de Clare above all others until she found him standing beside her father's greatest enemy. Now, as he cornered her in the dim corridors of the castle, his voice was rough with something unspoken. "You think I betrayed you," he murmured. "Tell me, my lady, what would you have done in my place?" Chapter 1. The Serpent's Kiss. The chill of the stones seeped through Lady Catherine of Dunmere's thin slippers, a stark reminder of the coldness that had settled in her heart. 5 years. 5 years since the day her world had shattered, the day she'd seen Sir Tristan de Clare, the man she'd loved with a fierce, unwavering devotion, standing beside Lord Beaumont, her father's sworn enemy, the very serpent in their midst. The image was seared into her memory. Tristan, his usually vibrant blue eyes clouded with a strange, unsettling calm, his hand resting on the hilt of a sword, the very sword that had once sworn fealty to her father, now seemingly poised to strike against him. The great hall of Dunmere Castle, usually alive with the boisterous energy of her father's men at arms and the warm glow of the hearth fires, felt like a tomb tonight. The feast celebrating the betrothal of her younger sister, Alara, to Lord Ashworth, a man Catherine barely knew and instinctively distrusted, was a hollow mockery of joy. Every forced smile, every strained laugh, echoed the betrayal she carried within her. She had excused herself from the festivities, pleading a headache, but the throbbing in her temples was nothing compared to the ache in her chest. She wandered through the familiar corridors, her footsteps echoing in the unsettling quiet. The tapestries depicting scenes of Dunmere's glorious past battles won, alliances forged, the unwavering strength of her lineage seemed to mock her current state of despair. Catherine reached the small, rarely used chapel, its arched doorway shrouded in shadow. She pushed open the heavy oak door, the hinges groaning in protest, and stepped inside. The air was thick with the scent of incense and beeswax, a faint, lingering fragrance of prayers long past. A single candle flickered on the altar, casting dancing shadows on the stone walls, illuminating the carved figure of the Virgin Mary, her serene face a stark contrast to the turmoil within Catherine. She sank to her knees on the cold stone floor, the rough texture biting into her skin. She tried to pray, to find solace in the familiar words, but they felt empty, hollow. Her faith, once a bedrock of her existence, had been shaken to its core. How could she reconcile the God of mercy and justice with the treachery she had witnessed? "My lady," the voice, deep and resonant, startled her. Catherine whirled around, her hand instinctively reaching for the small dagger she always kept hidden in the folds of her gown. It was Tristan. He stood in the doorway, the flickering candlelight casting his face in sharp relief, highlighting the strong lines of his jaw, the curve of his cheekbones, the intensity of his gaze. He was taller than she remembered, broader in the shoulders, his presence filling the small chapel. He wore a dark tunic, devoid of any ornamentation, and his sword, the infamous blade that had haunted her nightmares, hung at his side. Catherine's breath caught in her throat. Fear, raw and visceral, coursed through her, mingled with a surge of anger, a bitter residue of the love she had once felt for him. "What are you doing here?" she managed to whisper, her voice trembling. He stepped further into the chapel, the door closing behind him with a soft thud that sounded like a death knell in the silence. "I needed to see you." "See me?" Catherine scoffed, a desperate laugh escaping her lips. "After 5 years? After what you did?" He didn't flinch at the accusation in her voice. He simply stood there, his gaze unwavering, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "I know you believe I betrayed you, Catherine," he said, his voice low and laced with a weariness that surprised her. "And your family. Believe?" Catherine rose to her feet, her body shaking with suppressed fury. "I saw it with my own eyes, Tristan. You stood beside Beaumont, your sword drawn, ready to strike down my father, your sworn lord." He took a step closer, and Catherine instinctively recoiled, her hand tightening around the hilt of her dagger. He stopped, respecting the distance she demanded, but his eyes never left hers. There are things you don't know, Catherine, he said softly. Things that happened that day, things that I couldn't explain then, and perhaps still cannot fully explain now. Lies, she spat, the word laced with venom. You offer me lies, Tristan, just as you offered my father a serpent's kiss. The vivid analogy, both cutting and accurate, formed without her conscious thought. His jaw tightened, a flicker of pain crossing his features. I would never have harmed your father, Catherine. You must believe that. Why should I believe anything you say? She challenged, her voice rising. You broke your oath. You betrayed your honor. You betrayed me. The last word was barely a whisper, a choked sob escaping her lips. The pain of that betrayal, the personal wound that festered beneath the larger betrayal of her family and her house, was almost unbearable. He closed the distance between them then, ignoring her fear, her anger. He reached out and gently took her hand, his touch surprisingly warm against her cold skin. She tried to pull away, but his grip was firm, yet gentle. Look at me, Catherine, he said, his voice rough with something unspoken. Something that sounded dangerously close to regret. Look into my eyes and tell me, do you truly believe I could have willingly harmed the woman I swore to protect? His eyes, those deep blue eyes that had once held such warmth, such affection, were now filled with a turbulent mix of emotion, sorrow, regret, and something else, something she couldn't quite decipher. It was a look that challenged everything she thought she knew, everything she had convinced herself of for the past 5 years. He raised her hand, the one holding the dagger, and pressed it against his chest, directly over his heart. The fabric of his tunic was thin, and she could feel the steady, powerful beat of his heart beneath her palm. You think I betrayed you, he murmured, his voice a low rumble against her ear. Tell me, my lady, what would you have done in my place? His question hung in the air, unanswered, a chilling challenge that forced her to confront the unsettling possibility that the truth, like the shadows in the chapel, was far more complex than she had ever imagined. The cold certainty she had clung to for so long began to crumble, leaving her adrift in a sea of doubt and a flicker, just a faint flicker, of something she had thought long dead. Hope. Chapter 2. Shadows of Dunmere. The weight of Tristan's hand on hers, the steady beat of his heart against her palm, held Catherine captive. His question echoed in the silence of the chapel, a relentless tide eroding the carefully constructed walls of her resentment. What would she have done? The thought, a dangerous intruder, forced its way into the fortress of her anger. He released her hand, the absence of his touch leaving a sudden, surprising chill. Catherine lowered the dagger, her fingers numb, her mind reeling. She stepped back, needing distance, needing to breathe, to think. The candlelight flickered, casting distorted shadows on the walls, mirroring the turmoil within her. I don't know, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. The admission felt like a betrayal of her own convictions, a crack in the armor of her certainty. Tristan watched her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. He moved towards a small, stained glass window depicting St. George slaying the dragon, a symbol of courage and righteousness that felt painfully ironic in this moment. 5 years ago, he began, his voice low and measured, your father was summoned to Lord Beaumont's castle, ostensibly to discuss a border dispute. I was part of his escort, as was my duty. I had sworn an oath to protect him, to serve him faithfully. He paused, his gaze fixed on the window, his profile etched against the faint moonlight filtering through the colored glass. Catherine watched him, her heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against her ribs. She wanted to interrupt, to demand answers, to scream her accusations, but something in his posture, in the haunted look in his eyes, held her back. When we arrived, he continued, his voice laced with a weariness that spoke of a burden carried for too long, we were met not with diplomacy, but with treachery. Beaumont had laid a trap. His men outnumbered us 10-1. They were heavily armed, ready for battle. Catherine's breath caught in her throat. She remembered the rumors, the whispers that had circulated after her father's return, whispers of a near-fatal ambush, of a desperate fight for survival. But she had never heard the full story, never understood the details, blinded as she was by her own grief and anger. "Your father fought bravely," Tristan said, his voice softening with a hint of respect, a respect that extended even to his supposed enemy. "He is a warrior, through and through." But even he could not stand against such overwhelming odds. He turned to face her, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her shiver. "I was faced with a choice, Catherine. A choice that no knight should ever have to make." His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. Catherine felt a knot tighten in her stomach, a premonition of something terrible, something that would forever alter her perception of that fateful day. "Beaumont gave me an ultimatum," Tristan said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Join him, swear fealty to him, or watch your father and all of his men be slaughtered." He held a dagger to your father's throat, Catherine. I saw the fear in your father's eyes, the resignation, the silent plea for me to do whatever was necessary to save his life. Catherine felt a wave of nausea wash over her. She had to grip the edge of a nearby pew to steady herself. The image of her father, proud and defiant, reduced to such vulnerability, was almost unbearable. "I don't understand," she stammered, her voice trembling. "You swore an oath to my father, an oath of loyalty, of service, and I would have gladly died for him," Tristan interrupted, his voice raw with emotion. "But my death would not have saved him. It would have only added another body to the pile. Beaumont wanted a symbol, Catherine. He wanted the loyalty of your father's most trusted knight, a public display of his power, a message to all who would dare oppose him." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration and despair. "I made a choice, Catherine. A choice that has haunted me every day since. I knelt before Beaumont. I swore fealty to him. I betrayed everything I believed in to save your father's life." The silence that followed was thick with unspoken emotions. Catherine stared at him, her mind struggling to reconcile this new narrative with the image she had carried for so long. Could it be true? Could Tristan, the man she had loved, the man she had believed to be the epitome of honor and integrity, have been forced to make such an impossible choice? Why didn't you tell anyone?" she finally asked, her voice hoarse. "Why didn't you tell my father? Why did you let us all believe that I was a traitor?" Tristan finished her sentence, a bitter smile twisting his lips. "Because that was the price of the agreement, Catherine. Beaumont demanded my silence. He threatened to retaliate against your family if I ever revealed the truth. He said he would make sure that Dunmere suffered, that your sisters—" He didn't finish the sentence, but Catherine understood. The threat against Alara and Lyra, her younger sisters, was a chilling reminder of Beaumont's ruthlessness. She knew, in that moment, that Tristan had been telling the truth. He had sacrificed his honor, his reputation, his very soul, to protect her family. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. The anger, the resentment, the hatred she had harbored for 5 years began to dissipate, replaced by a profound sense of guilt, of shame, and a flicker of something she hadn't felt in years, a tentative, fragile hope. The shadows of Dunmere, both literal and metaphorical, seemed to press in on her, heavy with the weight of secrets and lies. But for the first time in a long time, a faint ray of light pierced through the darkness, a glimmer of understanding that illuminated a path forward, a path that might, just might, lead to redemption. And it terrified her. Chapter 3. A Knight's Torn Oath. The chapel's silence amplified the turmoil within Catherine. The flickering candlelight danced across Tristan's face, revealing the lines of strain etched around his eyes, the subtle tremor in his hands. He looked not like a triumphant betrayer, but a man ravaged by a choice he never wanted to make. "So you lived a lie," Catherine said, the words a soft accusation, yet tinged with a newfound understanding. "For 5 years, you endured the scorn, the whispers, the hatred." She couldn't bring herself to say her hatred. Not yet. Tristan nodded, his gaze dropping to the floor. "It was a small price to pay for your father's life, for the safety of your family. But your honor," Catherine whispered, the word echoing the countless times she had condemned him for his lack of it. He looked up, his blue eyes filled with a profound sadness. My honor was a sacrifice I was willing to make. An oath broken to save a life, is it truly broken, Catherine? Or is it transformed, reshaped into something different? His question hung between them, a philosophical and deeply personal dilemma. Catherine had always believed in the sanctity of oaths, in the unwavering adherence to duty and loyalty. But Tristan's story challenged that belief, forcing her to confront the complexities of a world where choices were rarely black and white. My father, he knows? She asked, the question a hesitant probe into the depths of her family's secrets. Tristan shook his head.
No.
Only Beaumont and I knew the truth. Your father believes I betrayed him. He forbade me from ever setting foot on Dunmere lands again. The weight of that revelation settled heavily upon Catherine. Her father, a man of unwavering principle, had lived with the same misconception, the same anger, that she had harbored. The thought of his pain, his sense of betrayal, added another layer of guilt to her own. Then why are you here? She asked, her voice regaining some of its strength. You risk everything by coming here, by speaking to me. Tristan stepped closer, his presence filling the small space between them. I had to see you, he said, his voice low and earnest. I had to try to explain, to ask for your understanding, if not your forgiveness. Forgiveness? Catherine echoed, the word a bitter taste on her tongue. Could she forgive him? Could she erase 5 years of pain and resentment, 5 years of believing him to be the worst kind of traitor? He reached out, his hand hovering hesitantly over hers, but he didn't touch her. I know I have no right to ask for it, he said. But I hope, perhaps, that knowing the truth that it might ease your burden, even if it cannot erase mine. His words, spoken with such humility, such vulnerability, chipped away at the last vestiges of her anger. She looked at him, really looked at him for the first time since that fateful day. She saw not the arrogant knight who had betrayed her, but a man scarred by war, by duty, by a love he had been forced to sacrifice. I don't know what to believe anymore, she confessed, her voice trembling. Everything I thought I knew, it's all been shattered. I understand, he said softly. It will take time, Catherine. Time to heal, time to trust again.
Trust.
The word hung between them, a fragile bridge between the past and the future. Could she ever truly trust him again? Could she trust anyone, after being so profoundly deceived? A sudden noise, the sound of footsteps approaching the chapel, shattered the fragile intimacy between them. Tristan's hand instinctively moved to the hilt of his sword, his body tensing, ready for a confrontation. Catherine's heart leaped into her throat. If they were discovered, if Tristan was found within the walls of Dunmere, it would mean his death. And despite everything, despite the pain and the confusion, she couldn't bear the thought of that. You have to go, she whispered urgently.
Quickly.
There's a secret passage behind the altar. It leads to the stables. She moved towards the altar, her mind racing, trying to remember the exact location of the hidden lever that opened the passage. She had discovered it as a child, exploring the castle's hidden nooks and crannies, a secret she had shared with no one. Tristan hesitated, his gaze locked on hers. I will not leave you, Catherine. Not like this. You must, she insisted, her voice firm despite her fear. For your own safety, and for the sake of the truth. Please, Tristan.
Go.
He held her gaze for a moment longer, his eyes searching hers, as if trying to memorize every detail of her face. Then, with a reluctant nod, he turned and followed her to the altar. Catherine found the hidden lever, concealed behind a carved panel depicting the Annunciation. She pressed it, and a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a dark, narrow passage. Go, she urged him, pushing him gently towards the opening. And be careful. He paused at the entrance, his hand brushing against hers. I will find a way to prove my loyalty, Catherine, he vowed, his voice a low murmur in the darkness. To you and to your family. I swear it. Then, he disappeared into the passage, leaving Catherine alone in the flickering candlelight, her heart pounding, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The secret passage closed with a soft click, sealing away the truth, for now, but leaving a crack, a sliver of hope, in the seemingly impenetrable walls of Dunmere's shadows. The weight of his vow, and the look in his eyes before he vanished, was a burden she now carried, a responsibility she didn't yet know how to face. Chapter 4. The Price of Loyalty. The heavy oak door of the chapel creaked open, flooding the dimly lit space with the harsh light of the hallway torches. Catherine, still standing near the altar, quickly composed herself, wiping away any lingering traces of emotion. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the sudden silence left by Tristan's departure. Lord Ashworth, Alara's betrothed, stood in the doorway, his brow furrowed with suspicion. He was a man of medium height, with a sharp, angular face and cold, calculating eyes that seemed to miss nothing. His richly embroidered tunic and the jeweled dagger at his belt spoke of his wealth and status, but there was a cruelty in his gaze that sent a shiver down Catherine's spine. "Lady Catherine," he said, his voice smooth and deceptively polite. "I was told you had retired for the evening. I trust you are feeling better?" "A slight headache, my lord," Catherine replied, forcing a smile. "The fresh air of the chapel it often helps." She gestured vaguely towards the altar, hoping he wouldn't notice the faint dust disturbed by the recently opened secret passage. Ashworth's gaze swept the chapel, taking in the flickering candle, the serene statue of the Virgin Mary, the empty pews. He seemed to linger for a moment on the altar, his eyes narrowing slightly, but he said nothing. "Your sister is concerned," he continued, turning his attention back to Catherine. "She noticed your absence from the festivities." "I shall return shortly," Catherine assured him. "I merely needed a moment of solitude." The word felt hollow, even to her own ears. Solitude was the last thing she had found in the chapel tonight. Her encounter with Tristan had shattered her carefully constructed world, leaving her adrift in a sea of uncertainty and conflicting emotions. Ashworth stepped further into the chapel, his presence dominating the small space. "You seem troubled, Lady Catherine," he observed, his voice laced with a subtle undercurrent of menace. "Is there something amiss?" Catherine forced herself to meet his gaze, to maintain an air of composure despite the turmoil within her. "Nothing that concerns you, my lord," she replied, her voice cool and distant. He raised an eyebrow, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. "Everything that concerns Dunmere concerns me, Lady Catherine," he said. "As your sister's future husband, I have a vested interest in the well-being of this family." His words, while seemingly innocuous, sent a chill down Catherine's spine. She knew that Ashworth's interest in Dunmere was not born of affection or loyalty, but of ambition and a hunger for power. He saw Alara, and through her, Dunmere, as a stepping stone to greater influence and control. "I assure you, my lord," Catherine said, her voice tight with suppressed anger, "Dunmere is perfectly capable of managing its own affairs." He chuckled, a low, unpleasant sound. "Of course, Lady Catherine. But even the strongest castle can benefit from reinforcement." He took a step closer, his gaze lingering on her face, as if searching for any sign of weakness, any hint of the secret she now carried. Catherine felt a surge of revulsion, a desperate urge to escape his presence, to flee back to the safety of her own chambers. "If you will excuse me, my lord," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I believe I should return to the feast." She brushed past him, her heart pounding, her mind racing. She could feel his eyes on her back, cold and calculating, as she walked away. She knew that he suspected something, that he was not a man to be easily fooled. As she made her way back to the great hall, the sounds of revelry, the laughter, the music, the clinking of goblets, seemed to mock her inner turmoil. She felt like an outsider, a stranger in her own home, burdened by a secret that could shatter the fragile peace of Dunmere. She saw her father, Lord Edmund, holding court at the high table, his face flushed with wine and laughter. He looked every inch the powerful lord, the fearless warrior, but Catherine now knew the vulnerability that lay beneath that facade. She saw Alara, radiant in her bridal finery, her eyes shining with a naive happiness that Catherine envied. And she saw Tristan's empty place at the table, a stark reminder of the sacrifice he had made, the price he had paid for his loyalty. A loyalty that had been twisted, manipulated, and used against him. The price of loyalty. It was a heavy burden, a crushing weight that Catherine now shared with Tristan. She had to find a way to help him, to clear his name, to restore his honor. But how could she do that without revealing the truth, without endangering her family, without risking the wrath of Lord Beaumont? The feast continued around her, a swirling vortex of noise and activity, but Catherine felt utterly alone, trapped in a web of secrets and lies, with no clear path forward. The shadows of Dunmere had deepened, and she knew that the coming days would be fraught with danger, with uncertainty, and with the constant, gnawing fear of discovery. As she forced a smile and rejoined the celebration, she knew one wrong step, one misplaced word, could bring the entire castle crashing down around them. Chapter 5. Whispers in the Cloisters. The days following the betrothal feast were a blur of strained smiles, veiled conversations, and a constant, underlying tension that permeated the very stones of Dunmere Castle. Catherine found herself avoiding her father, unable to meet his eyes without feeling a surge of guilt and shame for the secret she harbored. She watched Alara, her younger sister, with a mixture of pity and envy, knowing that her happiness was built on a foundation of lies and deception. Sleep offered little respite. Catherine's dreams were haunted by images of Tristan, his face a mask of sorrow and regret, and by the menacing figure of Lord Beaumont, his eyes cold and cruel. She would wake up in a cold sweat, her heart pounding, the echoes of Tristan's question, "What would you have done in my place?" ringing in her ears. She found herself drawn to the quieter corners of the castle, seeking refuge from the constant scrutiny of Lord Ashworth and the boisterous activity of the court. The library, with its towering shelves of ancient tomes and its hushed atmosphere, became her sanctuary. She spent hours poring over old chronicles, searching for any mention of Lord Beaumont, any clue that might shed light on his past, on his motivations, on his weaknesses. One afternoon, while lost in the dusty pages of a history of the northern kingdoms, she heard a soft cough behind her. She turned to see Sister Agnes, the elderly nun who served as Dunmere's healer and herbalist, standing in the doorway. Sister Agnes was a small, wiry woman with a sharp mind and a gentle heart. She had been a fixture at Dunmere for as long as Catherine could remember, tending to the sick and injured, offering comfort and wisdom to all who sought it. Her eyes, though aged, held a keen intelligence and a deep understanding of human nature. "My lady," Sister Agnes said, her voice soft and soothing. "You seem troubled. Is there something I can do to help?" Catherine hesitated. She had always trusted Sister Agnes, confided in her, sought her advice. But the secret she now carried was too dangerous, too explosive, to share with anyone. I am merely weary, sister," Catherine said, forcing a smile. "The preparations for the wedding they have been taxing." Sister Agnes studied her for a moment, her gaze unwavering. "There is more than weariness in your eyes, child," she said gently. "There is a sadness, a burden that you carry." Catherine looked away, unable to meet the nun's perceptive gaze. She felt a lump form in her throat, a desperate urge to unburden herself, to confide in someone she trusted. I cannot speak of it, sister," she whispered. "It is a secret." Sister Agnes nodded slowly. "Secrets can be heavy things, child," she said. "They can weigh on the soul, poison the spirit. Sometimes, sharing them can ease the burden, even if it cannot erase the pain." Catherine hesitated again. She knew that Sister Agnes was wise, that she was discreet, that she had a deep understanding of the complexities of the human heart. And perhaps, just perhaps, she could offer some guidance, some perspective, without Catherine having to reveal the full truth. "It concerns a knight," Catherine began, her voice trembling slightly. "A knight who was once close to this family. A knight who was accused of treachery." Sister Agnes's eyes widened slightly, but she said nothing, merely waiting for Catherine to continue. I have learned that the accusations may not be true, Catherine continued, choosing her words carefully. That he may have been forced to make an impossible choice. A choice that cost him his honor, his reputation. Sister Agnes reached out and gently took Catherine's hand. Her touch was warm and comforting. There are many shades of gray in this world, child, she said. What seems like treachery may, in fact, be an act of great courage, of great sacrifice. Catherine looked up at the nun, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and despair. But how can one know the truth? She asked. How can one reconcile such conflicting realities? Sister Agnes smiled sadly. The truth is often hidden, child, she said. Buried beneath layers of lies, of misunderstandings, of fear. It takes time and patience and a willingness to see beyond the surface. She paused, her gaze drifting towards the window, towards the distant hills shrouded in mist. Sometimes, she continued, her voice barely a whisper, the greatest betrayals are not those committed by our enemies, but those we inflict upon ourselves, by clinging to our own preconceived notions, by refusing to see the truth that lies before us. Her words struck a chord deep within Catherine. She realized that she had been guilty of that very betrayal, of clinging to her own anger and resentment, of refusing to consider the possibility that Tristan might be innocent. Thank you, sister, Catherine said, her voice filled with gratitude. You have given me much to think about. Sister Agnes squeezed her hand gently. Remember, child, she said, the heart knows the truth, even when the mind is clouded by doubt. Listen to your heart, Catherine. It will guide you. As Sister Agnes left the library, her footsteps echoing softly in the silence, Catherine felt a glimmer of hope, a flicker of resolve. She knew that the path ahead would be difficult, that the truth would be hard-won, but she was no longer alone. She had a confidant, an ally, in the quiet, wise nun who had offered her not answers, but guidance, not judgment, but understanding. The whispers in the cloisters, the gentle wisdom of Sister Agnes, had given her the strength to continue her quest, to unravel the secrets of Dunmere, and to seek justice for the knight whose torn oath had become her own burden. The seed of an idea began to form, a dangerous plan taking root in the fertile ground of her newfound resolve. Chapter 6. The Falcon's Flight. The air was crisp and cool, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth, as Catherine rode out from Dunmere's gates. She had chosen a sturdy, reliable mare, not her usual spirited palfrey, for this was not a leisurely ride. She wore a plain, dark riding habit and a hooded cloak that concealed her features. She wanted to blend in, to be unnoticed, to be just another traveler on the road. Her destination was the monastery of St. Michael, a secluded abbey nestled high in the foothills of the Dragon's Teeth Mountains. It was a place known for its scholarship, its library of rare manuscripts, and its order of monks who had taken a vow of silence, dedicating their lives to prayer and contemplation. It was also a place where Tristan had spent several months recovering from his wounds after a previous battle, years before the fateful day at Beaumont's castle. Catherine had learned this from Sister Agnes, who had discreetly provided her with the information, along with a small, sealed letter of introduction to the abbot. The nun had understood, without Catherine having to explicitly state it, that she was seeking information about Tristan, that she was trying to unravel the truth behind his alleged betrayal. The journey was long and arduous, taking her through dense forests, across rushing streams, and over rugged terrain. She rode alone, her only companions the wind and the occasional cry of a hawk circling overhead. The solitude gave her time to think, to plan, to wrestle with the conflicting emotions that still churned within her. She thought of Tristan, of his haunted eyes, of his quiet strength, of the sacrifice he had made. She thought of her father, of his pride, of his sense of betrayal, of the pain he must have endured. And she thought of Lord Beaumont, of his cruelty, of his ambition, of the web of deceit he had woven. As she rode, she began to formulate a plan. She knew that she could not confront Beaumont directly. He was too powerful, too ruthless. She needed evidence, proof of Tristan's innocence, something that would sway public opinion, something that would force even her father to reconsider his judgment. The monastery of St. Michael, she hoped, held the key. She believed that the monks, in their secluded sanctuary, might have knowledge of events that had transpired outside the castle walls. They might have heard rumors, whispers, secrets that could shed light on Beaumont's true nature, on his past dealings, on his motivations. The falcon was a symbol of the monastery swift, far-seeing. She hoped that, like the bird, she could find clarity in the distance. After 2 days of hard riding, she finally reached the monastery. It was a sprawling complex of stone buildings, perched on a rocky outcrop overlooking a vast valley. The silence was profound, broken only by the gentle murmur of the wind and the distant chanting of the monks. Catherine presented her letter of introduction to a young, nervous-looking novice at the gate. He led her through a series of courtyards and cloisters, the silence amplifying her sense of anticipation, of trepidation. Finally, she was ushered into the abbot's study, a small, austere room lined with bookshelves. The abbot, Father Benedict, was an elderly man with a kind face and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through her. He greeted her warmly, offering her food and drink, and then read Sister Agnes's letter carefully. "Sister Agnes speaks highly of you, Lady Catherine," he said, his voice a low rumble. "She says you are seeking understanding." "Yes, Father," Catherine replied, her voice hesitant. "I am seeking the truth." She explained her situation, carefully omitting any mention of Tristan's name or her own personal connection to the events. She spoke of a knight, falsely accused of treachery, of a powerful lord who may have manipulated events for his own gain, of a family torn apart by lies and deception. The abbot listened patiently, his gaze unwavering. When she had finished, he remained silent for a long moment, his fingers steepled in front of him. "The truth is often elusive, my child," he said finally. "It can be hidden in the shadows, obscured by the machinations of men. But it is always there, waiting to be discovered." He rose from his chair and walked over to a large, intricately carved wooden chest. He unlocked it and pulled out a small, leather-bound book. "This is a chronicle," he said, handing the book to Catherine. "It contains the records of this monastery for the past 100 years. It includes accounts of events, both great and small, that have occurred in this region." Catherine took the book, her hands trembling slightly. She opened it carefully, her eyes scanning the faded script. She found several entries mentioning Lord Beaumont, detailing his rise to power, his conflicts with neighboring lords, his reputation for ruthlessness and ambition. But there was one entry in particular that caught her attention. It was dated 5 years prior, shortly after the supposed betrayal at Beaumont's castle. It described a visit by a knight, badly injured and suffering from a deep emotional wound. The knight had sought refuge at the monastery, spending several weeks in prayer and contemplation. He had confided in one of the monks, Father Thomas, revealing a story of betrayal, of a forced oath, of a sacrifice made to save the life of his lord. The entry did not mention the knight's name, but Catherine knew, with a certainty that sent a shiver down her spine, that it was Tristan. The falcon had found its prey. The chronicle was not proof in itself, but it was a vital piece of the puzzle, a confirmation of Tristan's story, a testament to his suffering. It was a beginning. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the monastery grounds, Catherine knew her journey had only just begun. She felt a surge of determination, a renewed sense of purpose. She would find a way to clear Tristan's name, to expose Beaumont's treachery, to bring justice to Dunmere. And she would do it, even if it meant risking everything. Chapter 7. Beneath a Cursed Moon. Catherine left the monastery of St. Michael with a copy of the chronicle entry, carefully transcribed by Father Benedict, and a renewed sense of hope, albeit tinged with a growing sense of dread. The information she had gleaned was a powerful weapon, but wielding it would be dangerous, potentially fatal. The journey back to Dunmere was fraught with anxiety. She felt eyes on her everywhere, imagined whispers following her like shadows. The weight of the secret she carried, the knowledge she now possessed, felt like a physical burden, pressing down on her with each passing mile. The moon, a sliver in the inky sky during her outward journey, was now full, casting an eerie, silvery light on the landscape. It illuminated the path ahead, but also exposed her to any potential dangers lurking in the shadows. Local superstitions spoke of the full moon being a cursed time, when dark forces held sway and secrets were revealed. She arrived back at Dunmere under the cover of darkness, slipping through a side gate that she had left unlocked. The castle was quiet, the revelry of the past weeks replaced by an uneasy calm. She made her way to her chambers, her heart pounding, expecting to be discovered at any moment. But her return went unnoticed. She found her chambers undisturbed, her absence seemingly unremarked. She quickly changed out of her riding habit and into a simple gown, then hid the transcribed Chronicle entry beneath a loose floorboard under her bed. The next few days were a test of her patience and her acting skills. She had to maintain a facade of normalcy, to interact with her family, with Lord Ashworth, as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. She saw the world and the people around her through a different lens. She observed her father more closely, noticing the lines of worry etched on his face, the subtle tremor in his hands. She saw the way he avoided speaking of Tristan, the way his voice would tighten whenever the subject of loyalty or betrayal was mentioned. She also observed Lord Ashworth, watching his interactions with Alara, noting the possessiveness in his gaze, the subtle manipulations he employed to control her. She saw the way he looked at her, a mixture of suspicion and something else, something that made her skin crawl. One evening, during supper in the Great Hall, Ashworth brought up the subject of the upcoming tournament, a grand event planned to celebrate his betrothal to Alara. Knights from across the kingdom were expected to attend, to compete for glory and honor. "It will be a magnificent spectacle," Ashworth said, his voice booming across the hall. "A display of strength, of chivalry, of loyalty." He glanced at Catherine as he said the last word, his eyes glinting with a hidden meaning. Catherine forced herself to meet his gaze, to maintain a calm exterior. "Indeed, my lord," she replied. "It will be a fitting tribute to your union with Alara." Her father, who had been unusually quiet throughout the meal, spoke up then. "It will also be an opportunity to demonstrate the strength of Dunmere," he said, his voice firm. "To show our enemies that we are not to be trifled with." Catherine felt a chill run down her spine. Her father's words, while seemingly directed at the kingdom at large, felt like a veiled threat, a warning to anyone who dared to challenge the established order. Later that evening, Catherine sought out Sister Agnes in the castle's herb garden. The moon, still full and bright, cast long shadows across the rows of fragrant plants. The air was thick with the scent of lavender and rosemary. "Sister," Catherine said, her voice low and urgent. "I need your help again." Sister Agnes looked at her, her eyes filled with concern. "What is it, child?" Catherine recounted her journey to the monastery of St. Michael, her discovery of the Chronicle entry, her growing fear of Lord Ashworth's suspicions. "I believe he knows something," Catherine whispered.
Or at least he suspects something.
"He watches me constantly, probes me with veiled questions." Sister Agnes nodded slowly. "He is a dangerous man, Catherine," she said. "Ambitious, ruthless, and perceptive. You must be very careful." "I know," Catherine said. "But I cannot stand idly by while Tristan remains branded a traitor. I must find a way to clear his name, to expose Beaumont's lies." "And how do you propose to do that?" Sister Agnes asked, her voice gentle but firm. Catherine took a deep breath. "The tournament," she said. "It is a public event, attended by knights and nobles from across the kingdom. It is an opportunity to present the evidence I have found, to challenge Beaumont's narrative, to force him to reveal the truth." Sister Agnes looked at her, her eyes filled with a mixture of admiration and fear. "That is a bold plan, child," she said. "And a dangerous one. Beaumont will not take kindly to being challenged, especially in public.
He will retaliate."
"I know," Catherine said, "but I am prepared to take that risk. I cannot live with this lie any longer. I must do what is right, even if it means facing his wrath." The cursed moon hung high above them, casting its eerie light on their faces, illuminating the determination in Catherine's eyes, the concern in Sister Agnes's. The night air was filled with a sense of foreboding, a sense of impending danger, but also a sense of unwavering resolve. Catherine knew that she was walking a tightrope, that one wrong step could lead to disaster, but she was determined to see this through, to fight for justice, for truth, for the man whose fate had become inextricably linked with her own. The whispers of the full moon seemed to urge her on, a siren call to action, and a warning of the storm to come. Chapter 8. Scars of the Past. The preparations for the tournament consumed Dunmere. The castle buzzed with activity as servants scurried to and fro, preparing the grounds, erecting the stands, and polishing the armor of the participating knights. The air was thick with anticipation, with excitement, but beneath the surface, Catherine felt a growing sense of unease. She had managed to send a message to Tristan, a short, cryptic note delivered by a trusted falconer who frequented the monastery of St. Michael. She had informed him of her discovery, of her plan to present the evidence at the tournament, and had urged him to be present, to be prepared to defend himself. She had received no reply, which both worried and reassured her. She knew that Tristan would not risk revealing his location, that he would remain hidden until the opportune moment. But she also feared that he might not receive her message, that he might be unaware of her plan, that he might walk into a trap. Lord Ashworth continued to watch her, his gaze lingering on her face, his questions becoming more pointed, more probing. She felt like a cornered animal, constantly on guard, constantly aware of his scrutiny. She knew that he was suspicious, that he was trying to unravel her secrets, and she feared that he might discover the truth before she was ready. One afternoon, while walking in the castle gardens, she encountered her father. He was standing alone, gazing out at the distant hills, his face etched with a familiar sadness. "Father," Catherine said softly, approaching him. He turned to her, his eyes filled with a mixture of affection and something else, something she couldn't quite decipher. "Catherine," he said, his voice gruff. "You seem preoccupied these days. Is something troubling you?" She hesitated. She longed to confide in him, to tell him the truth about Tristan, to share the burdens she carried. But she knew that she could not yet. It was too dangerous, too risky. "I am merely concerned about the tournament, Father," she said, forcing a smile. "It is a grand event, and much is at stake." He nodded slowly. "Indeed," he said, "much is at stake. The honor of Dunmere, the future of our family." He paused, his gaze drifting back to the distant hills. "I have been thinking," he continued, his voice low and hesitant, about Tristan de Clare." Catherine's heart leaped into her throat. She felt a surge of fear, but also a flicker of hope. Was it possible that her father was beginning to question his own judgment? "What about him, Father?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. He sighed, a deep, weary sound. I have wondered if I was too hasty in my judgment," he confessed. If I allowed my anger to cloud my reason." Catherine felt a wave of relief wash over her. This was the opening she had been waiting for, the opportunity to plant the seeds of doubt, to prepare him for the truth. "He was a good knight, Father," she said softly. "Loyal, brave, honorable." Her father looked at her, his eyes searching hers. "And yet, he stood beside Beaumont," he said, his voice laced with a lingering bitterness. "He raised his sword against me." "Perhaps," Catherine said carefully, "he had his reasons. Perhaps there were circumstances that we did not understand." He frowned, his brow furrowed in thought. "What circumstances could possibly justify such treachery?" he asked. Catherine hesitated again. She knew that she was walking a fine line, that she could not reveal too much. Not yet. I do not know, Father," she said. "But I believe that there is more to the story than we have been told. I believe that Tristan may not be the traitor we believe him to be." The scars of past, she reflected, ran deep within all present. Her father looked at her for a long moment, his eyes filled with a mixture of confusion and hope. Then he nodded slowly. "Perhaps," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Perhaps you are right. Perhaps I owe it to him, to myself, to seek the truth. He turned and walked away, leaving Catherine standing alone in the garden, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. She had planted the seed. She had opened the door, just a crack, to the possibility of redemption. But she knew that the true test was yet to come. The tournament loomed, a battleground not just for knights, but for truth and lies, for justice and betrayal. And she knew that the outcome would determine not only Tristan's fate, but the fate of Dunmere and the fate of her own heart. The weight of her father's words, his tentative admission of doubt, was a heavy cloak, but one she wore with a growing sense of purpose. The battle was about to begin. Chapter 9. The Lioness Caged. The day of the tournament dawned bright and clear, the sky a vast expanse of blue, the air filled with the sounds of trumpets and cheering crowds. The stands were packed with nobles and commoners alike, all eager to witness the spectacle of knights competing for glory and honor. Catherine, dressed in a gown of deep blue velvet, sat beside Alara in the royal box, overlooking the jousting field. Her sister was radiant, her eyes shining with excitement, but Catherine felt a knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. She knew that this day would be a turning point, a moment of reckoning, for Tristan, for her family, and for herself. Lord Ashworth sat on Alara's other side, his face a mask of smug satisfaction. He had spared no expense in organizing the tournament, seeing it as an opportunity to display his wealth and power, to solidify his position as the future Lord of Dunmere. He had even invited Lord Beaumont, who sat in a place of honor nearby, his presence a constant reminder of the threat that hung over them. Catherine scanned the crowd, searching for any sign of Tristan. She had not seen him since that night in the chapel, had received no word from him since her message. She knew that he would be disguised, that he would not reveal his identity until the opportune moment, but she couldn't help but feel a surge of fear for his safety. The first few justs were uneventful, a display of skill and horsemanship, but Catherine's attention was elsewhere. She was waiting, watching, her senses on high alert. She noticed the subtle glances exchanged between Lord Ashworth and Lord Beaumont, the whispers and nods that spoke of a secret understanding, of a conspiracy that she was determined to expose. Then it happened. A knight, clad in black armor with no identifying crest, rode into the arena. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his movements graceful and powerful. He carried himself with an air of quiet confidence, of unwavering determination. Catherine knew instantly that it was Tristan. A hush fell over the crowd as the unknown knight challenged Lord Ashworth to a joust. Ashworth, taken aback by the audacity of the challenger, hesitated for a moment, then accepted, his face flushed with anger. The two knights faced each other at opposite ends of the arena, their lances lowered, their horses pawing the ground. The tension was palpable, the silence broken only by the beating of Catherine's heart. The trumpet sounded, and the two knights charged. The impact of their lances colliding was deafening, a clash of wood and steel that echoed across the stands. Ashworth's lance shattered, while Tristan's remained intact. Ashworth was unhorsed, thrown to the ground with a thud. The crowd erupted in cheers and gasps, astonished by the unknown knight's victory. Tristan dismounted, his movements slow and deliberate. He removed his helmet, revealing his face to the stunned onlookers. A collective gasp went up from the crowd. Catherine felt a surge of relief, of triumph, but also of fear. The moment of truth had arrived. "I am Sir Tristan de Clare," he announced, his voice ringing out across the arena. "And I have come to clear my name." Lord Beaumont rose to his feet, his face contorted with rage. "That man is a traitor," he shouted. "He betrayed his lord. He betrayed his oath." Tristan turned to face Beaumont, his eyes filled with a cold fury. "I betrayed no one," he said. "I was forced to make an impossible choice, a choice that you, Lord Beaumont, engineered." He then recounted the events of that fateful day, 5 years prior, telling the story of the ambush, of the ultimatum, of the sacrifice he had made to save Lord Edmund's life. He presented the transcribed chronicle entry from the monastery of St. Michael, the evidence that confirmed his story. The crowd listened in stunned silence, their initial shock giving way to a growing sense of outrage, of disbelief. Catherine saw her father rise to his feet, his face pale, his eyes fixed on Tristan. "Is this true?" Lord Edmund asked, his voice trembling. Did you save my life?" Tristan nodded. "I did, my lord," he said. "At the cost of my own honor." Lord Beaumont, seeing the tide of public opinion turning against him, tried to interrupt, to deny the accusations, but his voice was drowned out by the murmurs of the crowd. Catherine, feeling a surge of courage, rose to her feet. "I can corroborate Sir Tristan's story," she announced, her voice clear and strong. "I have seen the evidence, I have spoken to witnesses. He is telling the truth." All eyes turned to her, the unexpectedness of her intervention causing a ripple through those assembled. She felt like a lioness, caged for so long, finally breaking free. Lord Ashworth, realizing that his plans were unraveling, tried to silence her, but it was too late. The truth had been revealed, the lies exposed. The crowd, now fully convinced of Tristan's innocence, turned against Beaumont, demanding justice, demanding retribution. In that moment, surrounded by chaos and a roaring sense of justice, Catherine knew that she has done all she can. The outcome, whatever it may be, was no longer just in her hands. It was with fate, and with a very real sense of rising fury from those surrounding the exposed Lord Beaumont. The lioness was free, but the cage had been shattered, and the consequences were about to unfold. Chapter 10. A Dance of Deception. The uproar in the tournament stands was deafening. Lord Beaumont, his face a mask of fury and disbelief, tried to regain control, shouting denials and accusations, but his words were lost in the cacophony of outraged cries. Lord Edmund, his expression a mixture of shock, relief, and a dawning understanding, stood beside Tristan, a silent testament to the shifting tides of loyalty. Lord Ashworth, however, was not so easily defeated. He saw his carefully constructed plans, his ambitions for power and control, crumbling before his eyes. He knew that if Tristan's name was cleared, if Beaumont's treachery was exposed, his own position would be jeopardized. He had to act quickly, to salvage the situation, to regain the upper hand. "This is a farce," Ashworth shouted, his voice cutting through the din. "A clever ruse orchestrated by a disgraced knight and a disgruntled woman." He glared at Catherine, his eyes filled with a venomous hatred. Catherine met his gaze, unflinching. "The only disgruntled one here is you, my lord," she retorted. "You fear the truth will surface, because the truth will unravel your own web of lies." "Lies?" Ashworth scoffed. "I have spoken no lies. I have only sought to protect Dunmere, to secure its future." "By marrying my sister under false pretenses?" Catherine challenged. "By aligning yourself with a traitor and a murderer?" Ashworth's face turned crimson. He took a step towards Catherine, his hand moving to the hilt of his dagger.
"Iudare accuse-me?"
He snarled. "You, who have consorted with a known enemy of Dunmere." Tristan stepped in front of Catherine, shielding her from Ashworth's wrath. "Leave her out of this, Ashworth," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "This is between you and me." "Oh, it is far more than that," declare Ashworth hissed. "This is about loyalty, about honor, about the rightful claim to Dunmere." He turned to the crowd, his voice regaining its smooth, persuasive tone. "My lords, my ladies," he said, "I understand your confusion, your outrage. But I implore you, do not be swayed by the words of a man who has already proven his treachery. Do not be deceived by the emotional pleas of a woman who has been blinded by her affections." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the stands, seeking to gauge the mood of the crowd. He saw doubt, uncertainty, a lingering suspicion of Tristan that he could exploit. "I have proof," Ashworth continued, his voice rising in confidence. "Proof that Sir Tristan de Clare is not what he seems. Proof that he has been plotting against Dunmere, that he has been in league with other enemies of the realm." He reached into his tunic and pulled out a small, sealed scroll. "This letter," he said, holding it up for all to see, was intercepted by my men. It is written in Sir Tristan's own hand, addressed to a known rebel lord, outlining a plan to overthrow Lord Edmund and seize control of Dunmere. A gasp went up from the crowd. Catherine felt a wave of nausea wash over her. She knew that the letter was a forgery, a fabrication, but she had no way to prove it. Ashworth had played his trump card, a masterstroke of deception that threatened to undo everything she and Tristan had achieved. Tristan, however, remained calm. He looked at the letter, his expression unreadable. "That is a lie," he said, his voice steady. "I have never written such a letter." "Of course, you would deny it," Ashworth sneered. "But the evidence speaks for itself." He turned to Lord Edmund, his voice softening, adopting a tone of concern. "My lord," he said, "I know this is difficult for you. You have been deceived, betrayed by a man you trusted. But I am here to protect you, to protect Dunmere. Trust me, my lord. I will ensure that justice is served." Lord Edmund looked from Ashworth to Tristan, his face a mask of confusion and pain. He was torn, caught between his newfound belief in Tristan's innocence and the seemingly irrefutable evidence presented by Ashworth. It became a dangerous dance of deception, with carefully laid traps and the truth hanging precariously in the balance. Catherine knew that she had to act to expose Ashworth's lies, to save Tristan from this fabricated plot.
But how?
She had no proof, no evidence, only her word against his. And in this world of courtly intrigue, of shifting alliances, her word was worth little. The dance was turning deadly, and she was running out of steps. Chapter 11. Echoes of Treachery. Desperation clawed at Catherine. Ashworth's fabricated letter, held aloft like a banner of deceit, threatened to shatter the fragile trust they had painstakingly built. The crowd, swayed by the visual proof, murmured with renewed suspicion, their gazes shifting from Tristan to Lord Edmund, awaiting his judgment. "Father," Catherine pleaded, stepping forward, "you cannot believe this. It's a lie, a blatant forgery." Lord Edmund looked at her, his eyes filled with a painful conflict. He wanted to believe her, to trust his daughter, but the weight of the evidence, however false, pressed heavily upon him. He looked at Tristan, a silent question in his gaze. Tristan met his lord's eyes, his expression resolute. "My lord," he said, his voice clear and steady, "I have never betrayed you, nor would I ever. That letter is a fabrication, designed to discredit me and to further Lord Ashworth's own ambitions." Ashworth scoffed. "Ambitious? I am simply protecting Dunmere and securing the future of our union." He gestured towards Alara, who stood pale and trembling beside him, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. "Your union is built on lies, Ashworth," Catherine retorted. "Just like that letter." She turned to the crowd, her voice rising with passionate conviction. "Can you not see? He is manipulating you, playing on your fears, your prejudices. He is the traitor, not Tristan." A murmur of dissent rippled through the stands. Some looked at Catherine with skepticism, others with a dawning understanding. The seed of doubt had been planted, but it needed to be nurtured, to be grown into a force that could overcome Ashworth's deception. Suddenly, a voice spoke from the crowd, a voice that Catherine recognized instantly. "The lady speaks the truth." It was Sister Agnes, her usually serene face now flushed with righteous anger. She pushed her way through the crowd, her small figure surprisingly imposing. "I know Lord Ashworth," she continued, her voice ringing out across the arena. "I have tended to his wounds. I have heard his confessions. He is a man driven by greed and ambition, a man capable of any treachery to achieve his goals." Ashworth paled. He had not expected this, had not anticipated the intervention of the quiet, unassuming nun. He tried to interrupt, to silence her, but her words had already struck a chord with the crowd. "Sister Agnes," Lord Edmund said, his voice gaining strength, "what do you know of this?" "I know that Lord Ashworth has spoken of his desire to control Dunmere," Sister Agnes replied. "That he has plotted with Lord Beaumont to remove any obstacles to his power." She turned to Catherine, her eyes filled with a fierce determination. And I know that Lady Catherine has risked her own life to uncover the truth, to clear the name of an innocent man. Catherine felt a surge of gratitude towards the nun, a wave of relief that she was not alone in this fight. Sister Agnes's testimony, her reputation for honesty and integrity, had given her words weight, credibility. The crowd was now in an uproar, their voices a chaotic blend of outrage, confusion, and a growing demand for justice. Lord Beaumont, sensing that the tide had turned irrevocably against him, tried to slip away unnoticed, but he was stopped by Lord Edmund's men-at-arms. Ashworth, seeing his carefully constructed world collapsing around him, made one last, desperate attempt to salvage the situation. He drew his dagger, his eyes wild with panic. "This is all a lie," he screamed. "I am the rightful Lord of Dunmere. I will not be denied." He lunged at Tristan, his dagger aimed at his heart. But Tristan, prepared for such an attack, sidestepped the blow and disarmed Ashworth with a swift, decisive movement. The crowd gasped, then erupted in cheers. Ashworth, defeated and disgraced, was seized by Lord Edmund's men. The echoes of treachery, the reverberations of his deceit, now turned against him. Lord Edmund, his face a mixture of relief and shame, turned to Tristan. "Sir Tristan," he said, his voice filled with emotion, "I owe you an apology. I have wronged you grievously. I allowed my anger, my pride, to blind me to the truth." Tristan bowed his head. "My lord," he said, "you were deceived, as were we all. I understand your pain, your anger." Lord Edmund extended his hand to Tristan. "You have proven your loyalty, your honor, beyond any doubt," he said. "I ask for your forgiveness and for your continued service to Dunmere." Tristan took Lord Edmund's hand, sealing their reconciliation, their renewed bond of loyalty. The crowd roared its approval, their cheers echoing across the arena. The echoes of treachery had faded, replaced by the resounding triumph of truth. But Catherine knew that while this battle had been won, the war for their future was far from over. Chapter 12. The Tournament of Truths. With Ashworth and Beaumont subdued and imprisoned, the atmosphere at Dunmere shifted dramatically. The false cheer that had accompanied the tournament preparations was replaced by a sense of somber reflection, a collective reckoning with the deceptions that had nearly torn the castle apart. Lord Edmund, visibly aged by the ordeal, publicly reinstated Tristan to his former position of honor, acknowledging his bravery and apologizing for the years of unjust suspicion. The act was met with widespread approval, a palpable wave of relief washing over the assembled nobles and commoners. Alara, however, remained withdrawn and heartbroken. The revelation of Ashworth's treachery, his manipulative nature, had shattered her illusions of a happy marriage. She spent most of her time in the chapel, seeking solace in prayer, her youthful exuberance replaced by a quiet sadness. Catherine tried to comfort her sister, but found it difficult to bridge the gap that had formed between them. Alara blamed herself for being so easily deceived, for trusting Ashworth so completely. She also, subtly, blamed Catherine for exposing the truth, for shattering the dream she had clung to, however false it had been. "He seemed so kind, so attentive," Alara said one evening, her voice barely a whisper. "I thought he loved me." Catherine sighed. "He loved your position, Alara," she said gently. "He loved the power and prestige that would come with marrying into the Dunmere family. He did not love you." Alara looked at her, her eyes filled with tears. "But you loved Tristan," she said, a hint of accusation in her voice. "Even when you believed him to be a traitor." Catherine felt a pang of guilt. It was true. She had never stopped loving Tristan, even when her mind had condemned him. Her heart had known the truth, even when her reason had been clouded by doubt. "My situation was different, Alara," she said softly. "I had known Tristan for many years. I had seen his honor, his integrity firsthand. I could not reconcile the image I had of him with the accusations against him." Alara remained silent for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the flickering candlelight. "I wish I had been as wise as you," she said finally. I wish I had seen through his deception. Catherine reached out and took her sister's hand.
You were not foolish, Elara, she said.
You were simply hopeful. You wanted to believe in love, in happiness.
There is no shame in that.
The conversation marked a turning point in their relationship. Elara began to slowly heal, to accept the reality of Ashworth's betrayal, to understand that Catherine had acted not out of malice, but out of a desire to protect her family, to protect the truth. Meanwhile, Lord Edmund ordered a full investigation into Ashworth's and Beaumont's activities, uncovering a web of conspiracies that extended far beyond the borders of Dunmere. It became clear that they had been plotting with other disgruntled lords, seeking to destabilize the kingdom and seize power for themselves. The evidence Ashworth had presented, the forged letter, was quickly exposed as a fabrication. A scribe, imprisoned alongside Ashworth, confessed to having written the letter under duress, revealing the intricate details of the plot. The tournament, initially intended as a celebration of a false union, became a tournament of truths, a stage upon which the masks of deception were ripped away, revealing the true faces of loyalty and betrayal. It served not only to expose enemies but also to solidify alliances. Several knights who came for competition stayed to offer their renewed oaths. As the dust settled, Catherine found herself spending more time with Tristan. They would walk together in the gardens, ride through the forests, and talk for hours, sharing their thoughts, their fears, their hopes for the future. The 5 years of separation, the pain and the misunderstanding, had created a distance between them, a barrier that needed to be broken down. But the love they had once shared, the deep connection that had bound them together, was still there, flickering beneath the surface, waiting to be rekindled. It was a different kind of love now, tempered by hardship, by suffering, but also stronger, more resilient. One evening, as they stood on the castle ramparts, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Tristan turned to Catherine, his eyes filled with a tenderness that made her heart ache. "Catherine," he said softly, "I know I have caused you much pain. I know I have tested your trust, your faith in me, but I have never stopped loving you." Catherine's breath caught in her throat. She had longed to hear those words, had yearned for his love, for so long. "And I," she confessed, her voice trembling, "have never stopped loving you, Tristan. Even when I believed, when I thought." He reached out and gently cupped her face in his hands.
You do not need to say it, he said. I know.
"And I will spend the rest of my life proving my love to you, my loyalty, my devotion." He leaned in and kissed her, a soft, tender kiss that erased the years of separation, the pain of misunderstanding. It was a kiss that spoke of forgiveness, of reconciliation, of a love that had endured, that had survived the storm. The tournament of truths had revealed not only enemies, but also the enduring strength of their bond. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the land, they knew that their journey together was just beginning. Chapter 13. A Shattered Reflection. The kiss on the ramparts marked a turning point, a tentative step towards rebuilding the shattered fragments of their relationship. Yet, Catherine found that while the love remained, a subtle unease lingered, a shadow cast by the years of misunderstanding and the lingering presence of past betrayals. She found herself studying Tristan, searching for any hint of the deception she had once believed him capable of. She scrutinized his words, his actions, looking for any sign of hidden motives, of ulterior agendas. It was an unconscious reaction, a defense mechanism born of the pain she had endured, the fear of being betrayed again. Tristan, acutely aware of her scrutiny, bore it with a patience that both humbled and frustrated Catherine. He understood her doubts, her insecurities, but he also knew that he could not force her trust. He could only prove his love, his loyalty, through his actions, through his unwavering devotion. One day, while walking through the castle's portrait gallery, Catherine stopped in front of a painting of her father, a portrait commissioned years ago, depicting him in his prime, a strong, confident leader. She noticed, for the first time, a faint resemblance between her father and Tristan, a similar set to the jaw, a similar intensity in the eyes. "He looks like you," she said, turning to Tristan, who stood beside her. Tristan smiled, a hint of sadness in his eyes. "I have always admired your father," he said. "He was a role model to me, a man of honor, of integrity." Catherine looked back at the portrait, her mind racing. She remembered her father's words, his admission that he might have been too hasty in his judgment of Tristan. She remembered the years of friendship, of loyalty, that had existed between the two men before the fateful day at Beaumont's castle. He believes you now," she said, her voice hesitant.
"He trusts you again."
Tristan nodded.
"I know," he said.
"And I am grateful for his forgiveness, for his renewed faith in me." But Catherine hesitated, struggling to articulate the unease that still gnawed at her. "But can things ever be the same? Can we truly go back to the way things were?" Tristan looked at her, his eyes filled with a deep understanding. "No, Catherine," he said softly. "We cannot. The past cannot be erased. The scars, they will always be there." He reached out and gently touched her cheek, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw. "But we can build something new," he continued. "Something stronger, more resilient. A love that has been tested, that has endured, is a love that can withstand anything." His words resonated with Catherine, but they also stirred up a new wave of fear. She realized that she was afraid, not of Tristan, but of herself. She was afraid of her own vulnerability, of her own capacity for love, for trust. She had been hurt so deeply, had built such strong defenses around her heart, that she was afraid to let them down, to risk being hurt again. The shattered reflection she grappled with was not of Tristan, or her father, or the past, but of herself. Later that day, Catherine found herself in the castle's armory, surrounded by swords, shields, and suits of armor. She picked up a small, silver-handled dagger, a weapon she had carried with her for years, a symbol of her own strength, her own independence. She looked at her reflection in the polished blade, her face distorted, fragmented. She saw the fear in her eyes, the uncertainty, the lingering shadows of the past. She realized that she had been living in a state of constant vigilance, of constant defense, always expecting the worst, always prepared for betrayal. She had to let go of that fear, to relinquish that constant need for control. She had to trust, not just Tristan, but herself. She had to believe in her own strength, her own resilience, her own capacity for love. She put down the dagger, her hand trembling slightly. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the turmoil within her. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to truly feel, the vulnerability, the pain, the fear, but also the love, the hope, the longing for connection. When she opened her eyes, her reflection in the blade seemed clearer, less distorted. She saw not just the fear, but also the strength, the courage, the unwavering determination that had carried her through the darkest of times. She saw a woman who had been broken, but who had also been healed, a woman who was ready to love, to trust, to embrace the future, whatever it may hold. The reflection was still flawed, but it was whole, and it was hers. Chapter 14. The Heart's Reckoning. The breakthrough in the armory, the acceptance of her own vulnerability, marked a turning point for Catherine. She began to actively dismantle the walls she had built around her heart, to consciously choose trust over suspicion, love over fear. It was a gradual process, a delicate dance of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but with each passing day, she felt herself growing stronger, more confident, more open to the possibility of a future with Tristan. She started by spending more time with him, not just in the formal settings of the castle, but in the quieter, more intimate moments. They would walk in the gardens, discussing their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. They would ride together through the forests, sharing stories, laughter, and the comfortable silence of companionship. Catherine also made a conscious effort to reconnect with her family. She spent more time with Alara, offering her support and understanding, helping her to heal from the emotional wounds inflicted by Ashworth. She also sought out her father, engaging him in conversations about the future of Dunmere, about the challenges facing the kingdom, about his hopes and his regrets. One evening, While sitting with her father in his study, Catherine brought up the subject of Tristan again. "Father," she said, "I know you have reinstated Tristan to his former position, and I am grateful for that. But what of his future? What of our future?" Lord Edmund looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of affection and concern. "I have been thinking about that, Catherine," he said. "Tristan is a good man, a loyal knight. He deserves to be rewarded for his service, for his sacrifice." He paused, his gaze drifting towards the window, towards the darkening sky. "I have considered offering him a title, a land grant," he continued, "making him a lord in his own right." Catherine's heart leaped with joy. This was more than she had hoped for, more than she had dared to dream. It was a recognition not just of Tristan's loyalty, but of his worth, of his potential. "And what of us, father?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "What of our marriage?" Lord Edmund smiled, a rare, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "I would be honored," he said, "to have Tristan declare as my son-in-law. You have my blessing, Catherine. You have my full support." Catherine felt a wave of relief wash over her, a sense of profound happiness that she had not felt in years. She had her father's blessing, her family's support, and Tristan's love. The future, once so uncertain, now seemed bright with promise. Later that evening, Catherine found Tristan in the castle's great hall, standing near the hearth, his gaze fixed on the dancing flames. She approached him, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "Tristan," she said, "I have spoken to my father. He has offered you a title, a land grant. He has given us his blessing." Tristan turned to her, his eyes widening in surprise. He has?" he asked, his voice filled with disbelief. Catherine nodded, a smile spreading across her face. "He has," she said. "He wants to make you a lord, to give you land, to welcome you into our family." Tristan's expression shifted from surprise to joy, to a profound gratitude that brought tears to his eyes. He reached out and took Catherine's hands, his grip firm and reassuring. "Catherine," he said, his voice choked with emotion, I do not know what to say." "Say you will marry me," Catherine whispered, her eyes shining with love. "Say you will spend the rest of your life with me." Tristan's grip tightened on her hands. He leaned in and kissed her, a long, passionate kiss that sealed their commitment, their love, their future together. "I will," he said, his voice a low murmur against her lips. "I will marry you, Catherine. I will spend the rest of my life loving you, protecting you, cherishing you." The heart's reckoning, the internal battle Catherine had fought, had finally reached its conclusion. She had chosen love, she had chosen trust, she had chosen to embrace the future, with all its uncertainties, with all its challenges, but also with all its boundless possibilities. The shadows of the past still lingered, but they no longer held the power to define her, to control her. She was free, finally free, to love and be loved, to live and to thrive, with the man who had captured her heart, the man who had proven his worth, the man who had become her destiny. Chapter 15. Beyond the castle walls. The news of Catherine and Tristan's betrothal spread quickly throughout Dunmere, greeted with a mixture of joy and relief. The castle, which had been shrouded in shadows and suspicion for so long, finally seemed to awaken, to breathe again. Preparations for the wedding began immediately, a flurry of activity that brought a renewed sense of purpose and excitement to everyone involved. But Catherine and Tristan knew that their future together would not be confined to the castle walls, to the familiar comforts of Dunmere. They had a responsibility, a duty, to the wider kingdom, to the people who had suffered under the tyranny of Lord Beaumont and the treachery of Lord Ashworth. Tristan, with Lord Edmund's blessing, began to gather a force of loyal knights, men who had been wronged by Beaumont, men who were eager to seek justice, to restore order to the land. He planned to ride out, to confront the remaining pockets of resistance, to ensure that Beaumont's influence was eradicated completely. Catherine, meanwhile, began to prepare for her own journey, a journey of healing and reconciliation. She wanted to visit the villages and towns that had been affected by Beaumont's rule, to offer support and assistance to the people who had suffered under his oppression. Before they departed, however, they had one important task to accomplish: to visit the monastery of St. Michael, to thank Father Benedict and the monks for their invaluable assistance in uncovering the truth. They rode together, just the two of them, on a crisp autumn morning, the air filled with the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke. The journey was a peaceful one, a stark contrast to the turmoil and danger they had faced in recent months. They arrived at the monastery as the sun was setting, casting a golden glow on the stone buildings. Father Benedict greeted them warmly, his eyes filled with a quiet understanding. "Welcome, Lady Catherine, Sir Tristan," he said. "I am pleased to see you both well." Catherine and Tristan thanked him for his help, for providing them with the chronicle entry that had been so crucial in proving Tristan's innocence. "You have done a great service to the kingdom, Father," Tristan said. "You have helped to expose a dangerous conspiracy, to bring justice to those who have been wronged." Father Benedict smiled. "The truth is a powerful weapon, Sir Tristan," he said. "It can cut through lies and deception. It can heal wounds and restore balance. But it must be wielded with wisdom and compassion." Catherine and Tristan spent the night at the monastery, sharing a simple meal with the monks, listening to their chants, and finding solace in the quiet serenity of the place. The next morning, as they prepared to depart, Father Benedict offered them a parting gift, a small, intricately carved wooden box containing a single, perfectly preserved white falcon feather. "This is a symbol of hope, of clarity, of the pursuit of truth," he said. "May it guide you on your journey, may it protect you from harm, may it remind you of the power of faith and perseverance." Catherine and Tristan accepted the gift with gratitude, touched by the monk's generosity and wisdom. They knew that the feather would serve as a constant reminder of their visit to the monastery, of the lessons they had learned, of the importance of seeking truth and justice, even in the darkest of times. As they rode away from the monastery, heading towards the horizon, towards the challenges and uncertainties that lay ahead, Catherine and Tristan felt a renewed sense of purpose, a shared commitment to building a better future, not just for themselves, but for all those who lived beyond the castle walls. The quiet strength of the monastery, the symbol of the falcon, and the bond between them were their guides, their strength, and their inspiration. They were ready to face whatever came their way, together. Chapter 16. The Healer's Touch. Catherine's journey took her through the heart of the lands once controlled by Lord Beaumont, a landscape scarred by neglect and oppression. She traveled with a small retinue of guards and servants, but her primary companion was Sister Agnes, whose knowledge of healing and herbal remedies proved invaluable. They visited villages where crops had failed, where homes had been burned, where people had been subjected to Beaumont's arbitrary and cruel rule. Catherine listened to their stories, their grievances, their pleas for help. She saw the fear in their eyes, the desperation in their voices, the lingering effects of trauma and loss. In one village, she encountered a young woman, Alara's age, who had been severely injured during a raid by Beaumont's men. The woman's leg had been broken, and the wound had become infected. The local healer had done his best, but he lacked the skills and resources to treat such a serious injury. Sister Agnes, with her calm demeanor and her expert knowledge, immediately took charge. She cleaned the wound, applied a poultice of healing herbs, and set the broken bone with practiced skill. She then instructed the woman's family on how to care for her, providing them with supplies of herbs and bandages. Catherine watched in admiration as Sister Agnes worked, her gentle hands and soothing words bringing comfort and hope to the injured woman and her family. She realized that healing was not just about treating physical wounds, it was also about tending to the emotional and spiritual scars that lingered long after the physical pain had subsided. In another village, she met an elderly man who had lost his son to Beaumont's forces. The man was consumed by grief and anger, his spirit broken by the injustice he had suffered. Catherine sat with him, listening to his story, offering him words of comfort and support. She did not try to minimize his pain or to offer him false hope. She simply acknowledged his loss, validated his feelings, and shared her own experience of grief and betrayal. "I know what it is like to lose someone you love," she said. "To feel the pain of injustice, the sting of betrayal. It is a burden that can seem unbearable at times." The man looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and surprise. You understand?" he asked. Catherine nodded. "I do," she said. "I have lost much. But I have also learned that healing is possible, that even in the darkest of times, there is hope for a better future." She spoke to him of Tristan, of his wrongful accusation, of his struggle to clear his name, of their shared journey towards justice and reconciliation. She told him that they were working to rebuild the kingdom, to create a society where such injustices would not be tolerated, where everyone would have the opportunity to live in peace and security. The man listened intently, his expression gradually shifting from despair to a flicker of hope. You give me strength, Lady Catherine," he said. "You remind me that I am not alone." As Catherine continued her journey, she witnessed countless acts of kindness and resilience, of communities coming together to support one another, to rebuild their lives, to heal their wounds. She saw the power of human connection, the strength of the human spirit, the enduring capacity for hope and forgiveness. She also realized that her own healing journey was intertwined with the healing of the land, of the people she encountered. By offering comfort and support to others, she was also healing herself, finding a renewed sense of purpose, a deeper understanding of her own strength and resilience. The healer's touch, she discovered, was not just about mending physical wounds, but about mending the fabric of society, one person, one village, one act of kindness at a time. And as she continued her work, she felt a growing sense of connection, not just to the people she helped, but to the land itself, to the very essence of her being. Chapter 17. Flames of Defiance. While Catherine journeyed through the countryside, tending to the wounds inflicted by Beaumont's rule, Tristan rode at the head of his small but growing army, confronting the remnants of Beaumont's forces and quelling pockets of rebellion. He faced skirmishes, ambushes, and the constant threat of betrayal, but he pressed on, driven by his commitment to justice and his determination to secure a lasting peace for Dunmere and the surrounding lands. He found that many of Beaumont's former allies, seeing the tide turn against them, were quick to surrender, to swear fealty to Lord Edmund and to offer their services to Tristan. Others, however, remained defiant, fueled by a mixture of loyalty to Beaumont, personal ambition, and a deep-seated resentment of Dunmere's authority. One such group of rebels, led by a ruthless mercenary captain named Garin, had taken refuge in a fortified keep known as Blackwood Castle. Garin had a reputation for brutality and cunning, and he had gathered around him a band of hardened fighters, determined to resist Tristan's advance. Tristan knew that taking Blackwood Castle would be a difficult and costly undertaking. The keep was strategically located on a high cliff, surrounded by dense forests and treacherous terrain. It was well defended, with thick stone walls, strong gates, and a garrison of experienced soldiers. He sent scouts to assess the situation, to gather intelligence on Garin's forces, on the castle's defenses, on any weaknesses that could be exploited. He also sent messengers to Garin, offering him a chance to surrender peacefully, to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. Garin, however, refused to negotiate. He sent back a defiant message, vowing to fight to the death, to defend Blackwood Castle against Tristan's usurping forces. Tristan knew then that he had no choice but to lay siege to the castle, to force Garin's surrender through military might. He ordered his men to prepare for a long and arduous campaign, to build siege engines, to gather supplies, to establish a secure perimeter around the keep. The siege of Blackwood Castle lasted for several weeks, a grueling test of endurance and resolve for both sides. Tristan's forces bombarded the castle walls with catapults and trebuchets, launching stones and flaming projectiles that crashed against the stone, shaking the very foundations of the keep. Garin's men, in turn, defended their position fiercely, raining down arrows and boiling oil on the attackers, repelling any attempts to breach the walls. They were well supplied and well disciplined, and they showed no signs of weakening. Tristan, however, was patient and determined. He knew that time was on his side, that eventually, Garen's supplies would run out, that his men would grow weary, that their morale would falter. He also employed a strategy of psychological warfare, sending messages to Garen's men, offering them pardons and rewards if they surrendered, sowing seeds of doubt and dissension within the ranks of the defenders. One evening, as Tristan sat in his command tent, studying maps of the castle, reviewing reports from his scouts, he received an unexpected visitor. A young woman, dressed in the rough garb of a peasant, her face hidden by a hooded cloak. "Who are you?" Tristan asked, his hand moving to the hilt of his sword. "How did you get past my guards?" The woman removed her hood, revealing her face. It was Alara. Tristan was stunned. "Alara?" he exclaimed. "What are you doing here? This is no place for you." "I had to come," Alara said, her voice firm. "I had to help." She explained that she had learned of Garen's reputation, of his cruelty, of his mistreatment of the local villagers. She had heard stories of his brutality, of his willingness to use any means necessary to achieve his goals. He reminds me of Ashworth," Alara said, her voice trembling slightly. "I cannot stand idly by while another man like that terrorizes our people." Tristan looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of admiration and concern. He saw the pain in her eyes, the lingering effects of Ashworth's betrayal, but he also saw a newfound strength, a determination to fight for what she believed in.
"I understand," he said.
"But this is too dangerous, Alara. You could be killed." "I am not afraid," Alara said. "I have faced fear before. I have learned from my mistakes. I will not be a victim again." She then revealed that she had a plan, a daring and risky plan to infiltrate Blackwood Castle, to gather intelligence on Garen's forces, to help Tristan find a way to breach the defenses. Tristan listened to her plan, his initial skepticism giving way to a grudging respect for her courage, her ingenuity. He knew that her plan was dangerous, that it could cost her life, but he also saw that it might be their best chance to end the siege quickly, to avoid further bloodshed. The flames of defiance, he realized, burned not just within the castle walls, but also within the heart of the woman before him. It was a risky gambit, but the potential reward, a swift end to the conflict, was too significant to ignore. He agreed to her plan, knowing the dangers, but also trusting in Alara's unexpected strength. Chapter 18. A Kingdom Divided. Alara's plan was audacious, bordering on reckless. She proposed to disguise herself as a camp follower, one of the many women who often accompanied armies, providing services such as laundry, cooking, and mending. She would infiltrate Blackwood Castle, posing as a woman seeking employment, hoping to gain access to the inner workings of the keep, to gather information on Garen's plans, and, if possible, to create an opportunity for Tristan's forces to breach the defenses. Tristan, initially hesitant, eventually agreed, recognizing the potential strategic advantage her plan offered. He provided her with a small, concealed dagger, a vial of sleeping potion, and detailed instructions on how to communicate with his scouts, who would be waiting outside the castle walls. Under the cover of darkness, Alara slipped away from Tristan's camp, making her way towards Blackwood Castle. She had exchanged her fine clothes for rough, worn garments, dirted her face and hands, and adopted the demeanor of a weary, desperate woman seeking refuge. She approached the castle gates, her heart pounding, her mind racing. She knew that one wrong move, one misplaced word, could betray her identity, could lead to her capture, her death. The guards at the gate, initially suspicious, eventually allowed her to enter, believing her story of being a widow, displaced by the fighting, seeking work to support herself. Alara, maintaining her disguise, quickly assessed the situation within the castle walls. She observed the routines of the guards, the layout of the keep, the location of the armory, and the stores. She also encountered Garen, the mercenary captain, a man even more ruthless and brutal than she had imagined. He was tall and muscular, with a scarred face and cold, cruel eyes. He treated his men with contempt, his prisoners with savagery, and the women in the camp with a predatory lust. Alara, keeping her distance from Garen, focused on gathering information. She overheard conversations between the guards, learned of their dwindling supplies, of their growing discontent, of their fear of Tristan's forces. She also discovered that Garin had a weakness, a fondness for strong wine and a penchant for gambling. He would often spend his evenings in the castle's great hall, drinking and playing dice with his officers, losing himself in the pleasures of the moment. Alara saw this as an opportunity. She managed to obtain a small amount of the sleeping potion from her hidden vial, and one evening, while serving wine to Garin and his officers, she discreetly added the potion to their drinks. As the evening wore on, Garin and his officers grew increasingly drowsy, their senses dulled by the wine and the potion. Alara, pretending to be busy cleaning the hall, watched as they gradually succumbed to sleep, their heads lolling on the table, their snores echoing through the room. She then seized her chance. She slipped out of the hall, making her way to the main gate. She signaled to Tristan's scouts, who were waiting in the shadows, using a prearranged code of lantern flashes. Tristan's forces, alerted by the signal, launched a surprise attack. They stormed the gate, catching the remaining guards unawares. The sleeping potion had done its work, and the castle's defenses were severely weakened. The fighting was fierce but brief. Garin, awakened by the commotion, tried to rally his men, but it was too late. Tristan's forces, overwhelming in number and fueled by a righteous fury, quickly gained control of the keep. Garin was captured, his reign of terror brought to an end. Blackwood Castle, once a symbol of defiance, fell to Tristan's forces, a testament to Alara's bravery, her cunning, and her unwavering determination to fight for justice. A kingdom divided by fear and treachery started showing the first real signs of solidified unity. The victory at Blackwood Castle was a significant turning point in Tristan's campaign. It broke the back of the rebellion, demoralized Beaumont's remaining allies, and solidified Tristan's reputation as a skilled and courageous leader. News of Alara's courageous role spread throughout the kingdom, transforming her from a sheltered, naive girl into a figure of admiration and respect. But the war was not yet over. Other challenges remained. Other enemies lurked in the shadows. The kingdom was still divided, still recovering from the wounds of the past. And Tristan and Catherine knew that their journey, their struggle for a just and peaceful future, was far from complete. The victory, however, was a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of courage, resilience, and the unexpected strength that could be found even in the most unlikely of heroes. Chapter 19. The Sword Surrender. With Blackwood Castle secured and Garin's rebellion crushed, Tristan turned his attention to the remaining pockets of resistance and the larger task of consolidating Lord Edmund's rule. He sent emissaries to neighboring lords, offering terms of peace and alliance, seeking to unite the fractured kingdom under a banner of justice and stability. Some lords, weary of conflict and recognizing the shift in power, readily agreed to Tristan's terms. Others, however, remained hesitant, harboring old grudges, suspicious of Dunmere's intentions, or clinging to their own ambitions for power. One such lord was Baron Elric of Northwood, a powerful and influential nobleman who had long been a rival of Lord Edmund. Elric had remained neutral during Beaumont's rebellion, neither supporting nor opposing him, waiting to see which way the wind would blow. He now saw an opportunity to exploit the situation, to expand his own territory and influence at Dunmere's expense. Tristan knew that Elric posed a significant threat to the fragile peace he was trying to establish. He could not afford to ignore him, but he also did not want to engage in another costly and bloody conflict. He decided to try a different approach. He sent a message to Elric, requesting a meeting, a parley, to discuss their differences, to seek a peaceful resolution to their long-standing rivalry. Elric, intrigued by Tristan's offer, agreed to the meeting. They met at a neutral location, a small, abandoned hunting lodge in the heart of the Northwood Forest. Tristan arrived with only a small escort of trusted knights, while Elric brought a larger contingent of his own men-at-arms. The atmosphere was tense, the air thick with suspicion and mistrust. Both men were wary, cautious, aware of the potential for treachery. "Lord Elric," Tristan began, his voice calm and measured, I have come to offer you peace. I have come to offer you an opportunity to join us in building a stronger, more prosperous kingdom." Elric scoffed.
"Peace?" he said.
"You speak of peace while your army marches across the land, conquering and subjugating all who oppose you? We seek only to restore order, Lord Elric," Tristan replied, "to bring justice to those who have suffered under tyranny and oppression. We do not seek conquest, we seek unity." Elric studied Tristan, his eyes narrowed, searching for any sign of deception. "And what of Dunmer's ambitions?" he asked. "Will you be content to rule only your own lands, or do you seek to dominate the entire kingdom?" "Dunmer seeks only to be secure, Lord Elric," Tristan said. "To live in peace with its neighbors, to prosper through trade and cooperation. We have no desire to rule over others, only to live in harmony with them." The two men continued to talk, debating, arguing, negotiating. They discussed boundaries, trade agreements, mutual defense pacts, the sharing of resources. They spoke of their families, their histories, their hopes, and their fears. As the hours passed, a grudging respect began to develop between them. Elric saw in Tristan not a ruthless conqueror, but a man of honor, a man of integrity, a man genuinely committed to peace. Tristan, in turn, saw in Elric not a stubborn rival, but a proud and independent lord, a man who cared deeply for his people, for his land. Finally, after a long and arduous negotiation, they reached an agreement. Elric agreed to swear fealty to Lord Edmund, to recognize Dunmer's authority, but he also secured certain concessions, guarantees of his own autonomy, his own rights and privileges. It was a compromise, a delicate balance of power, but it was also a victory for peace, a testament to the power of diplomacy, of negotiation, of finding common ground even in the midst of conflict. Tristan, returning to Dunmer, felt a sense of accomplishment, a sense of relief. He had averted a war, he had secured a valuable ally, he had taken another step towards unifying the kingdom. But he also knew that the sword, while sheathed for now, could be drawn again at any moment. The peace he had forged was fragile, vulnerable to the whims of fate, to the ambitions of men. He could only hope that the seeds of trust he had planted would take root, would grow, would blossom into a lasting peace. The surrender of the sword, in this instance, was not a sign of weakness, but a symbol of strength, a demonstration of the power of diplomacy and the courage to choose peace over war. And as he rode back towards Dunmer, he knew that his greatest battles might still lie ahead, not on the battlefield, but in the hearts and minds of the men he sought to unite. Chapter 20. The Dawn of Forgiveness. The kingdom, slowly but surely, began to heal. The scars of war and betrayal remained, visible in the damaged castles, the fallow fields, and the wary eyes of the people, but a sense of hope, of renewal, began to permeate the land. Tristan's efforts to unite the lords, Catherine's work in tending to the wounded and displaced, and Lord Edmund's renewed commitment to just governance all contributed to a growing sense of stability and security. The wedding of Catherine and Tristan, long delayed by the turmoil and conflict, finally took place in the great hall of Dunmer Castle. It was a grand affair, attended by nobles and commoners alike, a celebration not just of their love, but of the kingdom's rebirth, of the triumph of justice over treachery. Alara, recovered from her heartbreak and transformed by her experiences, stood beside Catherine as her maid of honor. She had found a newfound strength and purpose, dedicating herself to helping others, to using her skills and intelligence to serve the kingdom. Lord Edmund, his face etched with a mixture of pride and relief, gave Catherine away, his blessing heartfelt and profound. He had come to terms with his past mistakes, his misjudgment of Tristan, and he was determined to be a better father, a better lord, a better man. As Catherine and Tristan exchanged their vows, their eyes locked, their voices filled with love and commitment, a sense of profound peace settled over the assembly. It was a moment of catharsis, of forgiveness, of reconciliation, a symbol of the new era that was dawning for Dunmer and the kingdom. The ceremony was followed by a lavish feast, filled with music, dancing, and laughter. The great hall, once a place of shadows and suspicion, was now alive with joy and celebration. Old wounds were healed, old rivalries forgotten, as people from all walks of life came together to celebrate the union of Catherine and Tristan, the promise of a brighter future. But even in the midst of the celebration, Catherine and Tristan knew that their work was not yet finished. They had a responsibility, a duty, to continue to build a better world, to ensure that the peace they had achieved would endure, that the injustices of the past would never be repeated. They established a council, composed of representatives from all corners of the kingdom, to advise Lord Edmund and to help him govern wisely and justly. They implemented reforms aimed at improving the lives of the common people, at promoting trade and prosperity, at fostering a sense of unity and shared purpose. They also continued to travel throughout the kingdom, visiting villages and towns, listening to the concerns of the people, addressing their grievances, ensuring that justice was served fairly and impartially. And, most importantly, they nurtured their own love, their own relationship, knowing that it was the foundation upon which their future and the future of the kingdom would be built. They had faced adversity together, had overcome obstacles, had emerged stronger and more united than ever before. The dawn of forgiveness, the title of this final chapter, was not just a metaphor, it was a reality. It was the forgiveness that Catherine had extended to Tristan, the forgiveness that Lord Edmund had offered to his daughter and his son-in-law, the forgiveness that the people of the kingdom had shown to one another, overcoming the divisions of the past. It was a forgiveness that was earned, that was deserved, that was the foundation of a new beginning. As the sun rose on their wedding day, casting its golden light on the land, Catherine and Tristan stood together on the ramparts of Dunmere Castle, looking out at the kingdom they had helped to rebuild, at the future they would shape together. They had faced the darkness, had endured the storm, and had emerged into the light, stronger, wiser, and more deeply in love than ever before. The trials were past, the battles won, and the future, though uncertain, was filled with hope, with promise, with the enduring power of love and forgiveness. Epilogue. Years passed. Dunmere Castle, once a fortress of solitude and suspicion, became a beacon of hope and prosperity. The kingdom, under the wise and just rule of Lord Edmund and later Tristan, flourished. The wounds of the past healed, leaving behind scars that served as reminders of the battles fought, the lessons learned. Catherine and Tristan had children, a son and a daughter, who grew up strong and brave, inheriting their parents' sense of justice, their compassion, their unwavering commitment to the well-being of their people. They were taught the stories of the past, the tales of treachery and betrayal, but also the stories of courage and resilience, of love and forgiveness. Alara, never marrying, found fulfillment in serving the kingdom. She became a trusted advisor to her brother-in-law, Tristan, using her intelligence and her experiences to help him govern wisely and justly. She traveled extensively, representing Dunmere at councils and gatherings, earning the respect and admiration of nobles and commoners alike. Lord Edmund, in his later years, retired to a quiet life of contemplation and reflection. He spent his days in the castle gardens, tending to the roses, reading ancient texts, and offering counsel to his children and grandchildren. He had made peace with his past, had forgiven himself for his mistakes, and he found solace in the knowledge that he had left Dunmere in capable hands. The chronicle entry from the monastery of St. Michael, the piece of evidence that had helped to clear Tristan's name, became a treasured artifact, a symbol of the power of truth, of the importance of perseverance, of the enduring strength of the human spirit. It was kept in a place of honor in the castle library, a reminder to future generations of the lessons learned, of the battles fought, of the love that had endured. Catherine and Tristan, as they grew older, never forgot the challenges they had faced, the sacrifices they had made. They continued to work tirelessly for the good of the kingdom, to promote peace and prosperity, to ensure that the injustices of the past would never be repeated. And, most importantly, they cherished their love for one another, a love that had been tested by fire, a love that had emerged stronger, more resilient, more profound than ever before. They would often walk together on the castle ramparts, hand in hand, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and crimson, remembering the journey they had taken together, the battles they had won, the future they had built. Their story became a legend, a tale told and retold throughout the kingdom, a testament to the power of love, of forgiveness, of the enduring human capacity for hope and renewal. It was a story of a knight's torn oath, a lady's unwavering faith, and a kingdom reborn from the ashes of betrayal. A story that ended, not with a final goodbye, but with a quiet, enduring affirmation of the power of love to conquer all. The scars remained, but they were a testament to strength, to resilience, and to a love that had weathered every storm.